Hi, and welcome to Documentary Films, Lecture 7, Part 1 of 2. Early documentary filmmaking: Robert Flaherty and Nanook of the North, John Grierson, EMB and the National Film Board of Canada, Parr Lorentz and Leni Riefenstahl, Documentary versus Propaganda. Just a few things we're going to talk about. Robert Flaherty was not a filmmaker per se. He was more of an adventurer and explorer, and he was hired by a French furrier company to go to Alaska and do this filming of how they get the skins and whatnot. And when Flaherty got back, he was pretty disappointed in the footage he had shot because there was really no narrative thread. It was just shots. He really, again, not being a filmmaker, didn't have any forethought of what kind of story he was telling. And, of course, film was made of nitrate in those days, and Mr. Flaherty was a smoker, and the two were a disaster. But it's one of those things we kind of call a happy accident in this industry, in that all his camera original negative went up in flames, but he did have a release, an answer print. These are all old terminology, grant you, but and he was able to bring that answer print, what little he had of it, to Paramount Studios because he wanted more funding to go back and do it again the right way and make a cohesive story. And this story became Nanook of the North. Now, Nanook was not the Eskimos' name, and yes, some of it was staged, but because Flaherty had so integrated himself into the Eskimo lifestyle and the lifestyle of these people, and he was pretty much a one-man show. He went up there, he would film, he would process the film, he would project it and show them the day's work. Audiences really took a shine to this movie, and when you get here to campus, we have this in the library. It's a brilliant documentary, and really, again, has such a natural feeling to it, even though some of it is contrived. And this becomes the first big hit, a documentary hit, that is, with American audiences. Let's take a look at a clip from it. Truly an amazing documentary. If you get a chance, I highly recommend it. And Flaherty went on to make other documentaries, one of them called Moana, which strongly influenced John Grierson. And he was also influenced by the editing style of Sergei Eisenstein. And he was the person who coined the term documentary. He saw that these films had, the films of Flaherty rather, had documentary value. And initially he was a social and political critic, and realized the documentary method of filmmaking could promote both agendas, both social and political critiquing. Well, Grierson begins working for the British government as part of the Empire Marketing Board. His first assignment was a series of propaganda films promoting agriculture. He also directed, the only film he actually directed was The Drifters, 1929, a documentary about the North Sea herring fishermen. Eventually, the EMB was disbanded in 1933, and Grierson's film unit moves to the General Post Office. And eventually, time after that, he eventually leaves England to help set up the National Film Board of Canada. So John Grierson really gives us the term documentary, and really is early Cinema Verite, which we'll talk about more in a second. And then we have Par Lawrence. Par Lawrence did a series of films called the New Deal docs. The New Deal was a plan by the FDR's government to get public works projects into underway to promote employment to get us out of the Depression. And Lawrence was a film critic that really wrote scathing reviews about Hollywood, and he really wanted to be a filmmaker. But because he had wrote such scathing reviews, when he went to go find funding, pretty much doors slammed in his face. So instead he wrote a book, 1933, and it was about FDR. So when FDR's administration went looking for their filmmaker to make these films, they latched onto Par Lawrence. Now, his first film for them was The Plow That Broke the Plains, about the over-farming of the middle of the United States. All this farmland, not a whole lot of water running through it, and it eventually creates the Dust Bowl. Let's take a look at some of this breathtaking imagery.
No place to go, and no place to stop. Nothing to eat, nothing to do. Their homes on 4 wheels, their work a desperate gamble for a day's labor in the fields along the highway. The price of a sack of beans or a tank of gas. All they ask is a chance to start over, and a chance for their children to eat, to have medical care, to have homes again. $50,000 a month. The sun and winds wrote the most tragic chapter in American agriculture.
Alright, now let's take a look at the other movie he made for the FDR administration called The River.
Memphis to Cairo, 1,000 miles up the river. And the planters brought their blacks and their plows and their cotton over to the river. Down through the Boone Trace, down through Cumberland Gap, over from Georgia and South Carolina, over from the Tidewater, over from the old cotton land west to the big river. West to the Steamboat Highway, down the highway to the sea.
All right, so something both these movies have in common is there's music that really sways the audience's reaction. There's voice of God narration telling you kind of how you should feel about things and telling you things. And But again, beautiful imagery. The only problem is that these are movies funded by the government about public works projects being promoted by the government, and therefore that it makes them propaganda. It should also be noted that Par Lawrence wrote the narration for The River and was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. And then we have a filmmaker like Leni Riefenstahl, who we talked about during the World War II lecture. And she indeed was a documentary filmmaker for the Nazi regime, and she was there heading up the filming of the 1938 Berlin Olympics, and it's called Olympia. Again, when you get here on campus, we also have this in the library. And in a stunning twist of irony, both The River and Olympia competed against each other that year at the Venice Film Festival. The River won, and Par Lawrence, after they disbanded his governmental group that was making these films for the New Deal docs, started making training films for the military, and eventually would go on to produce the actual documentary footage of the Nuremberg trials where Leni Riefenstahl was held on trial. But Olympia is so brilliant. She innovated so many techniques that we use today. Let's take a look at this.
It was the first film in which pits were dug so that the athletes could be filmed against the sky.
Jede Grube haben wir kämpfen müssen.
Und vor allem du warst, die dann letzten Endes das genaue Auge hatte, um richtig zu sagen, kommt es einen halben Meter weiter rechts oder einen halben Meter weiter links.
Riefenstahl now had the full scope to apply the lessons she had learned from Arnold Fanck, her great mentor.
Unsere schönste Idee, eine, die ihr hattet, ich glaube, du hattest sie, war das Katapult. Wir hatten da eine Bahn gebaut mit einem Katapult, das mitgehen sollte mit den Läufern, ja. Es war fantastisch. Und dann wurde es uns verboten. Wir konnten es nicht benutzen. Ach, wie witzig.
So gab es eine Menge neue Ideen.
Ja, ganz besonders war ja auch damals wichtig, die Grube für den Stabhochsprung.
Ja.
Weißt du?
Die war mitten, also links, etwas im Feld.
Ja, und wir konnten das alles hier gegen diese olympische Flamme aufnehmen. Das gab diese herrlichen Bilder.
She was later reproached for many of the images pioneered in Olympiad. Her critics felt that the cult of the body beautiful, Riefenstahl's obsession with strength and athletic perfection, were unmistakably fascist. The same was later said of her photographs of Nuber tribesmen.
Und dann war es wichtig damals, dass jeder Kameramann eine andere Optik und eine andere Kamera hatte. Ja. Du hattest manchmal eine Bell & Taul und Sinclair auch, und du hattest Bell & Taul.
Ja, die hatte zwei Geschwindigkeitsmöglichkeiten, die normale mit 24 Bilder und bis zu 48 Bilder. Und das war bei Sprüngen zum Beispiel ganz wichtig, weil der Körper ja viel genauer gesehen wurde.
Und zum ersten Mal.
Schöner die Bewegung. Ja.
Und dann hatten wir eine Steigerung durch die Askania, wo eine extra Optik für uns angefertigt wurde, die 600er Tele, damals gab es das ja noch nicht, wo der Herr Scheib nur diese wunderbaren Großaufnahmen gemacht hat. Kannst du dich erinnern? Wir durften ja nicht nah an die Läufer herangehen.
Ja, aber
das hat
so konnte man Porträts und alles Mögliche
machen.
Oben liegt schon vorn, Strandberg hinter ihm, Osenberg kämpft sich heran. Metcalf kommt, Ziel, Sieger im 100-Meter-Lauf.
Und noch etwas fällt mir ein, der Ballon. Könnt ihr euch erinnern?
Oh, ja.
Well, it seems every day they sent up a balloon with a 5mm camera with a 5mm lens on it. And when you think about it, how do we film football games these days? We have blimps, balloons that go up in the air and shoot from up there. So many pioneering techniques that are still used today to photograph sporting events. Brilliant. And this concludes Lecture 7, Documentary Filmmaking, Part 1 of 2.